How's it going?
Good evening, everyone. It's go time, and I'm excited for tonight because we have some fun stories to talk about. We're going to talk about zombies, we're going to talk about aliens, we're going to talk about Ron DeSantis, and we're going to talk about all of the cool and discouraging stuff that happened today. It's going to be a great show. This last comment I got in the chat says, love the show, but could really use a better time slot. Half the country is still at work. I know we are on Eastern time, and that makes it challenging, but you have to recognize, too, that we are also in competition, technically, not really, kind of in competition with Timcast IRL, which goes live at 8. So I will think about moving it to 7, but if you aren't able to catch the live show, you can always watch it later, or you can download it from any of a variety of podcast platforms. I get mine off Google Podcasts, and that is a great way to catch up and keep up to date with what's going on the show. Anyway, today is very gloomy outside. Hopefully it's more cheerful where you guys are. I know it's getting closer to spring, but we are not quite there yet. Let's all take a moment to retweet Andy. He says, tonight on Trad Queen Story Hour with Sour Patch Lids, Lydia reads passages from Ron DeSantis' new autobiography, Florida Man. I wish he had titled his autobiography, Florida Man. That would have been a very cool title. He actually really is doing really awesome stuff in Florida, so we will get into it. Let's start with our opener here, which is about zombies. Would you survive a zombie apocalypse like The Last of Us? I don't know if any of you guys have been watching that show. I hear relatively good things. I think Pedro Pascal's in it, and he's quite the gem. He was also in that movie that I keep seeing the gif of where one of the guys, Nicolas Cage, is like horrified as they're driving cross country. And he looks over at his buddy, and his buddy's like tripping out, really happy. And that guy's Pedro Pascal. Really, really funny. Kind of makes me want to watch the movie. I forget what it's called, like The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent or something. You guys let me know if you've seen that, if it's any good to watch. I don't watch a lot of movies. I feel like we should get into it. Anyway, let's talk about this. In this one, they're just talking about what states are going to be best for a zombie apocalypse, and they kind of break it down in interesting ways. So a new map shows the best U.S. states to hide during a zombie apocalypse. Data collection reveals California is the worst, duh, while Wyoming is the best place. That's kind of interesting because Wyoming's kind of close to California, actually. Let's see how they break it down. HBO's The Last of Us may be over for the season, but the idea of a zombie apocalypse is still on everyone's minds, specifically if they could make it out alive. Not many of us could, for sure. Most Americans are very out of shape. We're too busy. We're really stuck in our homes, and we're staying inside and eating processed foods. But if you live in certain states, it is going to be easier to keep off the zombies' radar. So let's look at this. All right, number 1, Wyoming. Number 2, Alaska. That's interesting. I probably would have put Alaska number 1. Number 3, Vermont. Then you have North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware. I wonder why. Then you have Montana, which is mountainous. That makes sense. Rhode Island, Hawaii. Yes, very isolated. That makes sense to me. Maine, New Hampshire. New Hampshire, very heavily armed, very freedom-loving, full of weird, quirky people. Idaho, West Virginia. Definitely West Virginia. Anywhere you get into the Appalachians, crazy, crazy like mountainous terrain, very difficult to navigate, especially for zombies, I think. There's also some serious cave systems over there on that side of the country. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the maps superimposed. There's one of all the disappearances in the US over the past like 50 years, and it's laid directly over the map of all the underground cave systems in the US. And it's like a 1-to-1 correlation. It seems pretty obvious to me, at least, that a lot of these disappearances are because people stumbled into and get lost in a lot of these caves. I think that would be a great place to hide from zombies if you could kind of fortify it. It would be like having a dugout built-in kind of thing. Yeah, Andy points out that Wyoming is so unpopulated, it would be easy to get far away from zombies. I agree. I think Wyoming is one of the least populated, as you can see here. Montana, the Dakotas, and Wyoming. Really, really good, wide open area. Montana, especially very mountainous. So is Wyoming. Wyoming also has Yellowstone, which is huge mountains too. Very cool. I would think that more of this area over here where the Appalachians are would be more, zombie unfriendly, but the least friendly state, or the most zombie friendly state, is California, and then Texas, which is interesting too. I'm not sure why that would be. Maybe just because of all the population. You have to also take into account Mexico down here, and then of course Canada up here, which might actually make North Dakota and Montana less desirable, but not sure how heavily populated those places are. The map, created by Insuranks, pulled information from a search terms to determine the ranking of the U.S. states. California ranks the least prepared, particularly for individuals who live near densely crowded places like San Francisco or LA. Along with places to avoid, the company found Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida are among the worst locations in the event of a zombie invasion, probably because of their population. Texas has a population of about 28 million, Florida has 21 million, wow, very heavily populated, and Pennsylvania has about 13 million, but California is the most densely populated with more than 40 million people, wow. This information coincides with a 2015 study conducted by a team of Cornell University researchers who focused on a fictional zombie outbreak as an approach to disease modeling. Very interesting. Cities would fall quickly, but it would take weeks for zombies to penetrate less densely populated areas and months to reach the northern mountain time zone. The team shared in a press release. If you somehow happen to find yourself in the midst of a fictional zombie outbreak and want to survive as long as possible, run for the northern Rockies. That makes sense to me, but Colorado is also a rocky state, which I'm not entirely sure why they wouldn't consider that to be, maybe it's just the population. That's the only thing I can think of. A lot of mountains there too. Really high altitude that would make it very hard for zombies to chase you. Let's see. As Joel and Ellie travel through Wyoming, Colorado, they have more run-ins with terrible people than humans in a zombie-like state. However, the 2015 study states that wherever Americans might try to hide, the Cornell researchers concluded that in the long term, when zombies attack, we are largely doomed. Yes, thank you. That's very encouraging. Have you guys watched this show? What do you think of it? I think that, yesterday we mentioned Rainn Wilson kind of critiqued Hollywood's stance on Christianity because they made the Christian leader the very, very bad guy. He's like a leader of a cannibal gang. And he is introduced by like reading a Bible verse, and he's displayed as being a horrible person who does horrible things basically because he's a Christian. And Rainn Wilson's like, yeah, that's not cool. T-Rod says, I thought California was already overrun with zombies. Everybody Smiles says, I'm ridiculously prepared for the zombie apocalypse. LOL, good for you. Thank you, Greg, for retweeting Andy. Yoshi Zero says, no, it's cold AF here. Going to be 18 tonight. Ooh, geez, it's colder than it's going to be here. Here's just like rainy and kind of snowy-ish. All right, we talked about zombies. It's time to talk about aliens. Not at all a distraction, guys. Don't worry about it. Don't look over there. There are zombies. There could be an alien mothership in our solar system. Dun, dun, dun. And this is from the Pentagon, so you know it's serious. Pentagon UFO chief says alien mothership in our solar system is possible. What? And here's a great picture. Somebody had a blast with this. There is a possibility that extraterrestrial motherships and smaller probes may be visiting planets in our solar system, the head of the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Research Office noted in a report draft shared Tuesday. An artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth. An operational construct not too dissimilar from NASA missions, Sean Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, wrote in a research report co-authored by Abraham Loeb, chairman of Harvard University's Astronomy Department. Again, this still just sounds like a giant distraction to me, but I'm going to have to say I think they kind of overplayed their hand with this one because I remember all the way back to the beginning of 2020, they've been talking about potential UFOs like really existing, and they were very serious about it. And I remember us at the time over at Timcast, we were like, what the heck's going on here? But they kept like drip feeding it, and they just kept talking about it. And given the pandemic and all the other stuff that's going on, at least in the US, could be different in other countries, but a lot of countries are really struggling with inflation and all this other economic stuff that could be really a distraction, because honestly, even people who really care about aliens and people who are concerned about alien invasion are still going to have to buy groceries, right? They're still going to have to figure out how to pay for gas. So the very real, very mundane things that we have to face are kind of like way more up in our faces than this alien stuff. But they keep telling us about it. And it's almost like they don't want us to be surprised by it if it does happen. Very strange stuff. I know Matt Walsh is super gung-ho about aliens, and I'm not entirely sure why. Like, we have enough trouble here. I don't know. This is a terrible adult joke. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but people always, I've heard it said, people say, I don't want to have a threesome. If I wanted to disappoint two people at once, I'd have dinner with my parents. It's exactly the same when you look at aliens. What are they going to say? Oh my gosh, your planet is in a huge mess. It's disgusting. It's horrible. I don't know if you guys see the memes about this is why aliens, lock their doors when they drive past Earth or whatever, or this is why aliens won't talk to us. Plenty of reasons to think that there are plenty of reasons that aliens won't want to talk to us because we do not have our ish together, but We'll see what happens. I'm not convinced. On February 16th, Senators Marco Rubio, Kristen Gillibrand, and 12 other senators sent a letter to Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks and Deputy Director of National Intelligence Stacey Dixon, calling for full funding of the AARO. What is the AARO? Let's look back here. Something about unidentified aerial phenomenon, I'm sure. Oh yeah, I remember there's this gigantic object dubbed Umau, the Hawaiian term for scout. Oh yeah, maybe that's what they think this is. Interesting. An artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth, an operation construct not dissimilar to a NASA mission. Okay, so this is just because this is something that we would do, we're assuming that this might be something that aliens would also do. I'm not convinced, but let's see. Loeb, on the other hand, let's see here. Kirkpatrick, who was appointed as director of the AARO when it was founded in July 2022, previously served as chief scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency's Mission and Space Intelligence Center. The AARO was established to investigate unidentified objects of interest around military installations, according to a Pentagon press release. Loeb, on the other hand, gained notoriety when he proposed our solar system had been traversed by its first extrasolar visitor in October 2017. At that time, the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii detected an object moving at a speed that caused some scientists to suggest it originated outside our system. The object's orbit also hinted at other forces besides the sun's gravitational pull influencing its movement. Scientists dubbed the object, as I said before, Umau, the Hawaiian term for scout, which Kirkpatrick and Loeb offer in their research paper as an example of a possible mothership with probe capabilities. Fascinating. So the research paper, titled Physical Constraints on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, comes following a month of intense scrutiny of unidentified flying objects, a stirring trend ignited when a Chinese spy balloon, captivated the nation by drifting across U.S. airspace. Yes, it captivated us. We didn't, for example, think that it was like some kind of enemy action taking place right over our own soil. And it continues, 3 additional unidentified objects were subsequently found. So, interesting. I don't know. I kind of feel like that's a huge distraction. You guys are welcome to disagree with me. That's fine either way. I just think we have way too much human stuff to worry about to think about aliens right now. But that could be exactly why they're telling us now. What do you think? St. Miles says, psyop or nat? Me. Meh. Yeah, I don't know. St. Miles says, alien, look, they have chickens on 2 legs like ours. There you go. Yeah, Bray's here. Maua. I don't know. I'm not good with pronouncing Hawaiian terms. Pardon me. And he says, it's also windy enough, could probably dig a moat of a series or ditches and let them fall in when strong gusts came. That's a good point about Wyoming. Agreed. He also says, guns. Cali's not the most densely populated. It's the most populated. Yeah. Cynthia says, I live in northern Alberta, same city where most of The Last of Us was filmed. We've got mountains and plenty of open fields to escape to. Greg Duvier says, well, I'm in the top 5. It's very flat here. I'm not sure how that would help, but very gun-friendly, so that helps. Yes, West Virginia is kind of the same way. Although it is close enough to D.C., that might turn out to be a big problem because I imagine that will be where the zombie outbreak originates. All right, so here we have DeSantis cleaning up Florida because there was a comment about that in the chat that I didn't have a chance to read. DeSantis strips luxurious Florida hotel's liquor license after hosting a lewd drag show with children present. Hyatt Regency Miami loses its liquor license after hosting drag queen show with children in audience. This took place in December 2022. It was a Christmas show. The Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulations warned the Hyatt Regency Miami against hosting a sexually explicit show with children present, but the hotel did anyway, according to this statement from Governor Ron DeSantis' office. Therefore, the department is revoking the venue's license for the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages, the statement adds. Sexually explicit content is not appropriate to display to children, and doing so violates Florida law. Governor Ron DeSantis stands up for the innocence of children in the classroom and throughout Florida. And here is how the people who are accusing Ron DeSantis of being a fascist are getting it wrong. When you apply for a liquor license, you have to go through the state, okay? So the state is already involved in your business. And if the state says something like, hey, you know what you shouldn't do? Have drag shows for kids. Guess what? If you don't listen to what they have to say, they're going to have that tool to use against you. Like it or not, personally, I don't really think the state should probably be involved with the dispensation of liquor licensing, but that's because I'm a little bit slightly more libertarian in that regard. I don't necessarily think it's the right place for the state to be. Here we go. Here's the thing. Murray and Peter present a drag queen Christmas hosted by Nina West and Trinity the Tuck. Very special guest, Todrick Hall. Very nice. As a result, minors attended and were knowingly admitted, the complaint states. During the show and in presence of a person less than 16 years of age, performers appeared on stage wearing sexually suggestive clothing and prosthetic female genitalia, as they do on a drag show. Like, there's no escaping that. Drag show is distinctly adult entertainment, and like it or hate it, I've never seen it, but I know lots of people who think it's funny. They think it's kind of provocative, can be very funny and entertaining. Not a place for kids. Just like, Cabernet is probably not for kids. Like a strip show is probably not for kids. All of this stuff is geared toward adults. And we know this. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. I certainly am for most of you guys. This is crazy to me. This was the drag show where there was insanely explicit stuff that came out. During the remixed song, Rudolph the Red-Nippled Reindeer, attendees heard the lyrics, just terrible, terrible, terrible. The complaint accused the hotel of violating Florida statute. It's pretty clear that's exactly what happened, and I'm genuinely kind of surprised this happened in Florida in the first place, because the scenes that took place on this show were just like overtly like, see what you do about this, because we're just going to do whatever we want and we don't care about the statutes in Florida. And sure enough, Florida is responding to this, and I think it's a great first step. You guys let me know if you agree or disagree. Andy says, no state. Yeah, Andy also says, I have never seen prosthetic female genitalia. I'm very happy to hear that, my dear husband. It sounds horrifying, doesn't it? Well, that's not all Ron DeSantis is up to. He is also doing this, which I really appreciate. Okay, so before we start, I also want to add that I think they should do this in pro-life states with the process of abortion, because I have constantly said for my entire pro-life career, basically since I was like 8 years old, I knew that I was very strongly pro-life, and the more I learned about it, the more pro-life I became. Literally in anatomy and physiology class, just sitting there listening, I was like, yep, yeah, you really can't deny. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that somebody wouldn't see that this is a huge issue. I wish that they would show pictures of the process. So what Ron DeSantis is doing, in response to Joe Biden taking it upon himself to call denying children gender-affirming care borderline sin, Ron DeSantis has decided to show pictures of what a gender-affirming surgery entails. And it's disturbing, and I'm going to show you guys, and I'll give you fair warning. I think you've probably seen already a lot of these pictures if you are on Twitter. It's very important to know what happens, just like it's very important to know what happens during an abortion. Whether you're pro-abortion or anti-abortion, you need to know what happens, like either so you can defend it fully or so you can dismantle it fully, because it's a horrifying procedure. And if you believe that life starts at conception, you're going to have a huge issue with it. And even if you are in favor of it, you really need to be willing to accept it and stare it directly in the face and say, yes, I support that. I'm 100% okay with that. Carry on. It should happen right up until birth or whatever they're saying now. But let's read the article. This is from Not the Bee. DeSantis responds to Biden calling Florida cruel with ads showing what trans surgeries actually look like. Sometimes a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Yesterday, Biden attacked Florida's laws banning transgender surgery on minors as cruel and nearly sinful. Today, the DeSantis team responded by showing the world what exactly it is that Joe Biden and the Democrats are defending. And they say, warning, graphic. And it is. And I'm sorry to share this with you, but this is the state of the world right now. Biden wants to paint these transgender surgery bans as cruel, but when you see the butchery that goes on with these surgeries, it is hard to imagine doing something more cruel and unnecessary to a child. So here we have Allie Beth Stuckey commenting, I put the transition of children on the same level of evil as abortion, slavery, Nazism. Simply do not see a path of reconciliation with people who not only think it's acceptable, but wonderful. And DeSantis also responded directly. It is not sinful to prohibit the mutilation of minors. I mean, today on things that should not have to be said, holy cow. It is not acceptable for the federal government to mandate that procedures like sex change operations be allowed for kids. And here is Biden suggesting it is sinful not to allow this to happen. Let's see if we can get the audio on here. I can just read it.
Transgender kids are really hard. What's going on in Florida is, as my mother would say, close to sinful. I mean, it's just terrible what they're doing. It's not like, a kid wakes up one morning and says, I decided I want to become a man, or I want to become a woman, or I want to change. I mean, what?
Joe Biden is attempting to use people's compassion against their own reason. He's trying to say, oh, these poor little kids, it's not like they wake up one day and they're like, I want to change my gender. You're right, Joe, that doesn't happen. Kids aren't naturally transgender. Kids are transgender because parents and teachers, don't get me wrong, it's not just parents, they are transgender, or they think they are because the adults in their lives are grooming them. Like, I feel like this is another thing that really doesn't need to be said. But apparently it does, because this man has applesauce for brains. Let's continue with the article. Oh yeah, it just finishes and says, which way America? Yeah. Ron DeSantis is 100% correct. And I don't know, you know what, let me see. I'm going to show you guys this ad. You can handle it. You're adults.
What's going on in Florida is, as my mother would say, close to sinful. I mean, it's just terrible what they're doing. It's not like, a kid wakes up one morning and says, I decided I want to become a man, or I want to become a woman, or I want to change. I mean, what are they thinking about here? They're human beings. They love, they have feelings, they have inclinations that are, it just, to me, is, I don't know, it's cruel. And the way we do it is we make sure we pass legislation like we passed on same-sex marriage. You mess with that, you're breaking the law, and you're going to be held accountable.
Yeah, so that's really lovely. But again, I do think that if you're going to defend something like this, you need to know exactly what it looks like. Like, I would love for Joe Biden to be, I have this game that I perhaps am very viciously fantasize about playing with leftists, where I just sit them down and I have them answer the effing question. For Joe Biden, it would be to show him a picture of these surgeries and ask them, which do you think is more cruel? To allow a child to finish up a phase where they think they're a girl when they're a boy, or when they think they're a boy when they're actually a girl, or to cut off a piece of their arm and fashion it into some strange facsimile of some kind of thing that they're not, that will never function the way it's intended to work, that will only ever cause them harm, infection, and difficulty. Like, I don't know if you guys have watched What is a Woman by Matt Walsh. He talked to a woman who was obviously born a female, assigned female at birth. It was observed that she was a female when she was born, and she went through all of this stuff, and they got to her when she was older than a lot of these kids. And she said, they can get to you when you're 40. Trust me, your kids don't stand a chance. And she was saying, I am much more likely to die of an infection. I will die much earlier than I would have otherwise because I went through so much of this. And it's honestly heartbreaking, because this poor lady took all these steps in an attempt to match up her outside body with her inside thoughts about herself. And instead of receiving any kind of psychological counseling, or any talk therapy, or any cognitive behavioral therapy, or any kind of support to kind of try to change her mind, instead of trying to change her body to match her mind, she disfigured herself, and the doctors did it for her because they got money off of it. So distressing. And to allow this to happen to children, I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was something like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, they were telling us at Vanderbilt, this was actually happening in Tennessee, where the Daily Wire is located. At Vanderbilt, they were saying, not only does this not happen with children, we have moved directly from this never happens to it does happen and it's good. And now Biden is coming out and saying, we're going to make a federal law about this. And we'll make sure that anybody who's not supporting this kind of actual mutilation is punished, which is deeply disturbing to me, obviously, of course. Again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. And I do know that with the concept of mutilation comes the understanding of regret. But you cannot tell me that these kids are not going to seriously regret what they've done to themselves. And I am nothing but compassionate for the people who do this and then realize they've made a terrible mistake, like the woman that Matt talked to. I forget her name. I think she goes by Scott and doesn't care which pronouns you use for her, because she appears to be male, but she has a more feminine voice. And she'll tell you she was born as a female and she just went through all of these operations to try to make herself match up. which is very refreshing. I was very happy to hear what she had to say, and I'm glad she's speaking out against it. I think that as women need to speak out against feminism, I think that people who survive this kind of awful mutilation need to come and speak out against this movement too. I think that there's a heavy responsibility on people in the demographic in which this kind of thing is happening to raise their voices and to try to make themselves heard. Because if you try to say anything about it, if I were a bigger figure, I'm sure I would get endless flack for saying this kind of thing because I'm not a trans person. I've never been trans. My heart goes out to them, but at the same time, I don't have their lived experience. If you are in the demographic, you have an obligation to stop something harmful that you see happening, to stop that happening for other people. So good for that lady. Good on her. Thank you very much, Greg, for your super chat. Feelings cannot change your biology. That is correct. Keenan Smith says Google Music talking about lobsters lawsuits, new pigment paint, and black holes in labs. Thank you. That's very off topic. I appreciate that. Stuart says super chats survive demonetization. Excellent indeed. They do. I think so. I guess we'll find out. I don't care if I get demonetized. It's very important that I talk about this. I'm very proud of DeSantis for doing this. I really feel like he's just taking the most direct possible approach to this, and I could not be happier. Like, he's so in tune with what's going on. Like, he's in tune with the fact that this is happening at all. I would love for Trump to talk exactly about this. I would love for Trump to put something together where he's like, do you realize what's actually happening here? This is what's actually happening. It's so disturbing. And I'm sure he would be disturbed. Like, he strikes me as a genuinely good guy, but he doesn't seem like he's as direct as DeSantis. And I really appreciate DeSantis's direct approach. So more power to him for sure. Greg Duvier says, well, I'm in the top 5. It's very flat here. Not sure how that would help, but very gun friendly. Oh, right. We talked about that. Oh yeah, the zombies. Hello, Bree. Thank you for joining. Andy says, better hope there isn't a Wuhan Institute of Zombification. Yeah, I can't wait for that. Yes, Greg agrees with me. The zombies are already in DC. Whisper, hello there. Andy says, no state. Drag is not for kids whatsoever. Correct. Zach has a criticism for DeSantis, says he should have pressed obscenity charges. Florida pressed obscenity charges against the guy who owns Girls Gone Wild, and all DeSantis does is pull a liquor license. Weak sauce election stunt. We will see. Have you ever seen another governor do this in any other state? I haven't either. Personally, I'm pretty impressed with it. I think it's a great start. Babyface George Nelson Ray says, I get it, but why didn't he do more? He expelled the liquor license. That's absolutely not enough. What should he have done? Because you know the left is already calling him a fascist, right? And there was a law floating around about how he was going to clamp down on bloggers that were speaking against him. He shot that down immediately, of course. I raised an eyebrow at that. I was like, you know what? It is possible to go too far. I certainly don't think the governor should say, no, you can't criticize me. That's absolutely like, Banana Republic stuff. I think it is possible to go too far, and I personally don't want him to go too far. I don't want him to do too much, but I am happy to see him using the power vested to him as the governor and the ability to use his state to accomplish his goals, like his cultural goals. I'm happy for him. And he says, just a friendly reminder that Super Chat survived demonetization. Yes. Zach says that's a bare female chest. Well, don't worry. There's nothing to see there anymore. New Frankenstein's monsters. I feel so bad for these kids. I really, really do. And yeah, you're right. We'll see if we get in trouble for those images, but we'll see. What was all that black crusty stuff? I'm assuming that is an infection. When you take off the top layer of skin, you run into problems because that layer of skin is supposed to be there. That is your body's first line of defense against infections, and messing with skin is no good. And he says obscenities charges are far more likely to get shot down on First Amendment grounds. Exactly. Yeah, I honestly don't want to live in a country where we have obscenities charges run wild, because to me that just smacks of the UK. St. Miles says pulling the liquor license from a resort town borders on the death sentence for the business. Good point. And you're right. And I hope that is 100% a death sentence for them. Although they are, tied to the Hyatt or whatever. Really big hotel chain. So we'll see if anything actually happens. But I want to revisit the SVB chronicles because this is kind of interesting. Woke Brigade trolls Wall Street Journal columnist Andy Kessler and calls him a bigot, racist, and white supremacist. For suggesting that failed SVB board was distracted by diversity demands. I wanted to find this article, but I didn't have a chance before we started. Let's see what it has to say. They might tell us what he said in it. Andy Kessler noted the bank's focus on diversity in a column about the collapse. He was eviscerated by Democrats and the media who say it was a racist take. Kessler ultimately blamed the bank collapse on a series of management errors. Yeah, for sure. A Wall Street Journal columnist has been branded a bigot, racist, and white supremacist for criticizing this. Andy Kessler had a long career in finance before joining the Journal as a columnist. He wrote on Sunday that a number of reasons could have led to the bank's collapse, the largest of any financial institute since 2008. In its proxy statement, SVB notes that besides 91% of their board being independent and 45% women, they also have 1 Black, 1 LGBTQ+, and 2 veterans. I'm not saying 12 white men would have avoided this mess, but the company may have been distracted by diversity demands. He wrote in the piece titled, "Who Killed Silicon Valley Bank?" Was there regulatory failure? Perhaps. SVB was regulated like a bank, but looked more like a money market fund. Then there's this. In its proxy statement, they note that beside 91% of their board being independent, we already read that. He went on to summarize that the fault lay with management and a series of mistakes. Management screwed up interest rates, underestimated customer withdrawals, hired the wrong people, and failed to sell equity. I think it's a very fair analysis because what are people going to think of equity, diversity, and inclusion now? Are they going to think more highly of it or less? Because that was not a shining example of how it's supposed to work. He says you're only really allowed one mistake. More proved fatal. Was management hubristic, delusional, or incompetent? Sometimes there's no difference. But it was Kessler's mention of the board's focus on diversity that was seized on. Vanity Fair, of course, accused him of advancing white supremacy while the Daily Beast labeled his words ludicrous. California Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis called him offensive and inaccurate. Oh no, someone's offensive. Stop the presses. Bloomberg host Caroline Hyde said, "I'm speechless. Speechless! Not dramatic or hyperbolic at all. Yes, failings occurred at executive level, but to blame focus on diversity is disgusting. Disgusting. That had nothing to do with it, I'm sure." And here we are, the Daily Beast. Oh gosh. WSJ makes the ludicrous suggestion diverse board may have doomed SVB. This sounds to me like the lady protesting a little bit too much. The Wall Street Journal goes full white supremacist, blames Silicon Valley Bank collapse on 1 Black and 1 LGBTQ+. No, the issue wasn't the individuals involved, and you effing know it. The issue was the focus on making sure that you checked those diversity and inclusion boxes. You were not hiring for merit, you were hiring to check your inclusion boxes. WSJ wonders, did Silicon Valley Bank die because 1 Black person was on its board? You see the spin they're taking on this? Obviously, that's not what he said. His point was that they were distracted from their actual mission, from their key primary goals as a bank, by trying to be diverse and inclusive and equitable. And I mean, duh. We know this is the case. You know that once you get that equity stuff, it's not equality, it is equity. It's much more important to them than actual equality. They're trying to avenge past sins as they view it by pushing all the grass to be the exact same height. Signature Bank had former congressman known for Dodd-Frank Act and it couldn't avoid collapse. He's openly gay. I think that was the issue. Weird statement. NBC's Stephanie Rule said during an appearance on MSNBC, "It's absolute stupidity. They are definitely protesting too much. I do not agree with them at all, obviously." New York Magazine's Kara Swisher, oh gosh, she's the worst, said during an appearance on Rule's show last night, "It's a nonsense argument. Harumph, I say, they are clutching their pearls. He could not possibly be more wrong and more white supremacist. He's probably a male, too. See, Wall Street Journal should be much more inclusive and diverse in their hiring of columnists. Harumph, I say, pure bigotry. Complete trash. Please do better. Super rich, panicky, mostly white men." Give me a break. This is so ridiculous to me. And it's frustrating because you know that he's on to something here, right? They would not be reacting this way if they didn't know that he was probably really close to being correct. But this is their sacred cow. They cannot let it go, and they never will because they need this to not be the case. They really don't like the fact that this bank is up up in everyone's attention and is actually super, super diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And for a while there, like we talked about yesterday, they did not have a risk analyst on board. They weren't even examining the risk factors for months out of the last year. Something like 9 out of 12 months last year, they didn't even have someone who was looking at that kind of stuff, which to me just smacks of absolute incompetence. Like, forget diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is just sheer incompetence. Let's swap out the I in there for inclusion with incompetence, because that's really what they were gunning for. They did not seem at all interested in actually running a business, much more interested in their month-long pride celebrations and their lesbian day of visibility. And what was that lady's name? The lady who was in charge of, I don't even remember, but she was like, my queer immigrant experience is so important and it really brings people together. And it's just like, this is mind numbing. This is not what you want to hear from your bank. You want to hear that we got your money. We're going to take good care of it. We're going to invest it wisely. Don't worry about our skin color. Don't worry about our faces. Worry about nothing else except the fact that we've got your back. You're a small business. You need help with your money. We'll take good care of it. That's all you need to know. That is literally all you need to know. You don't need to know about the sexuality of the people on their board. Give me a break. Give me a break. Absolutely wild to me. St. Miles says DEI equals failure of the bank to do their fiduciary duties. I agree. And he says, chat's on fire tonight for sure. This is a family show. You attracted us. What did you say, Andy? Goodness gracious. All right. I agree. J.A. Jr. says, I'm late to the show. I think the prosthetic female genitalia go on your hat. I'm not sure where they go. I don't want to know. They probably wear them around their waists. I'm really glad that Ron DeSantis clamped down on this. I've never seen a Republican governor do anything like this. I am pretty proud of the Tennessee governor for passing the bill against gender affirming care for minors. I think that's very important. And I think that Florida has already done something similar, which is why Ron DeSantis is coming out so stinking hard against all of this stuff right now. More power to him. Dr. Strange, they protect the natural law. Interesting. Sticking feathers up your bum does not make you a chicken. That's a great point, Keenan. Thank you for that. Goodness gracious. Yeah, anyway, Andy, knees and ankles need a rest sometimes. I'll be back soon. Yeah, so he's not skating every single day. I finally was like, hey, I don't want to skate every single day this year. It's hard on me. It's hard on me to carve out time for my schedule to go out with you. Don't get me wrong. I love doing it. Loved skating with Andy, but at the same time, it is hard on the knee and ankle. We got to get those things fixed up before he's able to skate every single day once again. Oh gosh. Okay. So there's more wokeness in our future. So buckle up, buckaroos. Toe curling moment. Drew Barrymore kneels at the feet of Biden's favorite trans TikToker Dylan Mulvaney in fawning TV interview. Drew Barrymore knelt down before controversial transgender star Dylan Mulvaney during a segment on her show. Twitter users were left divided over the move, with some slamming Mulvaney's history of overly sexualizing and infantilizing womanhood. Yes, his days of girlhood are very inspiring. But others pointed out Barrymore had a habit of kneeling before her guests. Interesting, that I did not know. That's actually good to know. Drew Barrymore has divided viewers by kneeling in front of the controversial star Dylan Mulvaney during an exchange about online trolling. Barrymore appeared to bow down in front of Mulvaney, a prominent TikTok personality who recently met President Biden in the White House during a segment on the Drew Barrymore show. But the gesture has raised eyebrows on social media, with many pointing out she is on her hands and feet for a star who has been accused of trivializing womanhood with her Dylan's infantilized online persona. Mulvaney often refers to themselves as a girl rather than a woman, has called themselves a bimbo frequently, and once likened themselves to a Barbie doll. This is actually how Dylan refers to female genitalia. Dylan calls it a Barbie pouch. I'm just going to leave that there. It's disgusting, and I really don't like how Dylan is supposedly representing my gender. The two women, okay, Daily Mail, that's awfully inclusive of you, were engaged in a conversation about online hate when Mulvaney said to Barrymore, "It is interesting because I had a look at someone like you, and I cannot imagine anyone disliking you." Gross, weird, wild. Don't love it. Barrymore's response was getting onto her hands and knees as she says, "Oh, please, do you want to know ironically who dislikes me the most sometimes? Myself." Mulvaney then joined her on the floor and the two embrace. Barrymore later compares the online trolls terrorizing Mulvaney to her own experiences after receiving negative movie reviews as a child star. I'm going to stop you right there. I've been a public figure to a much lesser degree than Dylan Mulvaney for a relatively short period of my life. I happen to know that if you are in the public eye, there are going to be people out there who don't like you, especially if you are pushing an incredibly polarizing viewpoint. Now, my viewpoints are nothing like trying to push a trans agenda on an entire half of the world's population. My viewpoint's pretty straightforward. I think that life is very important. It should be respected even before birth. I think that, we should be shrinking the size of the government, not growing it. I think we should be fiscally conservative. We should be as careful with our money as Andy and I are trying to be. These viewpoints are really not that controversial, but they get me a lot of hate too. And it's okay. It's just the way it is. The fact that I was actually talking to a friend recently and I said, you know what the price of living in a free speech country is? Being annoyed part of the time, most of the time, by the free speech that these people have. It's fine. It comes with the territory. They're allowed to speak freely, but so are you. It's very important. I personally am glad that Dylan Mulvaney says what Dylan has to say because everyone should be paying attention to that. Very important. That's what's happening. That's what they're trying to do. I'm glad that they're not hiding it away. I'm glad that they're parading it in front of everyone because it's not going to be a selling point come election 2024. But let's go on. Mulvaney joins her on the floor to embrace. Many people took to Twitter to complain about the bizarre gesture, with one viewer accusing Barrymore of fawning over her guest. Yes, 100%. You have to fawn over these guests. You have no other choice. If you don't, like Andy Kessler of the Wall Street Journal, you are accused of being a bigot. And in this instance, a transphobe. Another said, Drew Barrymore has been an embarrassment for years. Now she's kneeling to the man that is making a mockery of the entire female gender. Incredible. Prominent gender critic Ollie London, who detransitioned after initially believing he was a woman, wrote, Drew Barrymore gets down on her knees to embrace Dylan Mulvaney after Dylan peddled a sob story about how hard it is to be a woman. Yes, that's incredibly ironic and really rich. Twitter user Jeanette Hardwick said, Drew Barrymore kneels before the atrocious Dylan Mulvaney who caricatures girlhood. It is not real, Drew. None of it. Please stop being a handmaiden. Interesting. Sharp words. There is a lady in The Handmaid's Tale called Aunt Lydia, which I don't love because she's one of the worst. She's the person who sells out all the other women. And that's kind of what this looks like to me. If you're a woman and you're not speaking out against this movement, you kind of owe your entire gender an apology because this is going to affect your daughters. It's going to affect your sisters, probably your mothers when they go into nursing homes and they have no refuge. If they say, hey, you know what? I'd really prefer female-only care. Like maybe I have a history of sexual trauma. I'd really appreciate to be respected and to be cared for by people who share my gender. They're not going to get that. I remember when that passed in Scotland, I was so disturbed because then I was thinking about all of these poor old ladies in nursing homes who have no one to look out for them, who have no one there for them 24/7, no members of their family around them, who say things like, I would really prefer female-only care. They're not going to be allowed to request that anymore. And that's really awful because people with dementia are especially capable of being victimized. It's almost like female prisoners in these prisons now where they're going to be housed with men who pretend to be women so that they can get into these prisons and take advantage of women. Pictures shared online show the former child star kneeling before a litany of stars, including Kate Hudson and Hillary Clinton. Okay. Anytime I see a clip of the Drew Barrymore show, she's always either kneeling in front of or sitting on top of another woman, wrote one viewer. That's very strange. Another shared several shots of the host kneeling as she wrote, she frequently kneels and sits on the floor with guests. So weird to me. It's something she does when interviewing them. Here are just a few examples. Much of the outrage stemmed from Mulvaney's controversial TikTok videos, which have previously come under fire for over-sexualizing and infantilizing womanhood. For sure. Mulvaney was an actor and comedian living in LA when Mulvaney decided to transition into a woman last March. Dylan Mulvaney was an actor who was ticked off that he was not allowed to play the role of women. There you go. He found the life hack that lets you play women. He joined TikTok in 2020 following a stint playing Elder White in the Book of Mormon on Broadway. In March last year, she began her transitioning journey, which won her 10.8 million followers on TikTok. This is how you get famous. Dylan knows this. This is what you do. This is how you play the game. And I have to admit, it's not stupid. It is a very clever thing to do. That's how you get famous. That's how you become a big deal. That's how you get to the White House, for Pete's sake. Okay, so you can't tell me that Dylan is doing the wrong things to get what Dylan wants. This is exactly in line with what Dylan had in mind. Dylan became a prominent name in the transgender community. Dylan recently met with as part of a panel to discuss gender affirming care. But Dylan is not without controversy, as critics have previously labeled Dylan's hyper-feminine online persona insulting. Yes, indeed. Literally all the stereotypes of women Dylan has fully weighed into and views apparently as part of being a woman. From my understanding, I think that Dylan is either just an actor trying to act a part, honestly, which nothing would surprise me less because Dylan has not gone through any surgery other than facial feminization, like trimming down cheekbones, trying to get rid of some of the more masculine aspects of the face. Hasn't gone through any kind of bottom surgery, any kind of actual top surgery. Not sure if they're doing hormone treatment or anything like that. They don't seem to have committed to this idea. That's what makes me think this definitely might be an acting shtick. Maybe next month, Dylan will come out and say, hey, you know what? I was just trolling. Look at me. I got 11 million followers on TikTok. I got in with a president. You see how crazy this is? This is wild. Now do you understand why a man would want to dress up like a woman? I'm just saying. Would be interesting. But anyway, Andy mentioned the other day, woman plus. Andy says, women plus what? What does a trans woman have that a cis woman does not? That's a great question. Thank you, dear. Sorenko says trans women have designer body parts. That's right. OCB says, anyone see Heather McDonald collapses video? No, I did not. Unless Heather McDonald is a lady I'm thinking of. Not sure. Joel Salvatore says, Dylan believes women have hiking heels. That's right. Dylan, in one of the first videos I saw from them, was like, oh my gosh, my first day as a girl, I've already cried 3 times, changed my mind. Someone asked me how I was feeling and I said, fine, even though I wasn't. Can you imagine like a more mocking, like disambiguation of what femininity is? That's not what makes a woman a woman. The fact that a woman has XY chromosomes is what makes a woman a biological woman. And all of the things that come along with that, all of the confusing hormones, all of whatever, the hot flashes, the ability to have children, the overborn compassion that makes us like good caregivers and very compassionate mothers and like nurses. There's a reason so many women are in nursing. This is what makes a woman a woman. Not wearing high heels and being outside and being afraid of the sun. Paul says, you guys rock. Appreciate the streams. Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate your super chat for sure. Stuart says, men and women should have the right to choose what sex their nurses, doctors, and carers are. That is what I signed up for when I worked in mental health. Do no harm. Exactly. And it just crushes me to know that not only female prisoners who are already in a vulnerable position, admittedly through partly their own fault, but these old women are not going to be in a position where they're going to be able to say, hey, you know what? I really would feel more comfortable with someone who shares my gender taking care of me, just because maybe I have a hard history. Maybe I had a hard upbringing. Maybe I've been abused in different ways. They don't care about that. It's far more important to them to affirm someone's delusion about their own gender than it is to actually care for people who are incredibly vulnerable and who really deserve their protection and care. Anyway, Andy says, I like that I can move a couch with Lydia. That's correct. Get to a lady who grew up on a farm. Yes, for sure. I did grow up on a farm. We moved a lot of furniture. We spent a lot of, I recall, many days of my youth, many Saturdays, it was typically where we would go out and clean the chicken shed. And that was a lot of shoveling and hauling and all that stuff. And we would go shooting and we'd have all kinds of fun like that. Wonderful upbringing. Highly recommend. XX, that's right. The females are more organized than men. We have XX chromosomes. Men have XY. Thank you for clarifying that for me, JJR. I appreciate that for sure. You know what I mean. They have female chromosomes. That's what sets us aside from men altogether. Sorenko says, I think Dylan has histrionic personality disorder similar to narcissistic, but seems to fit better in terms of diagnostic criteria. I think Dylan's just an actor. Period. That's been my diagnosis right from the beginning. And if I recall correctly, Dylan was very upset, like I said earlier, about not being allowed to play women, and now Dylan is. That's just what happened there. Possibly too simple. There's probably a lot more going on. Probably really this thirst for attention and this desire to be a victim, have a lot of followers, be kind of famous, go to the White House, just kind of get your foot in the door and just be an activist. And there's certainly some appeal there. I completely understand it. Makes sense to me. Keenan says the purpose of a man is to love a woman and the purpose of a woman is to love a man. The Game of Love by Wayne Fontana. That is correct, sir. OCB says woman plus. Andy, do I have to explain that? LOL. No, you don't. This is just a family friendly show. He was telling me earlier what woman plus means, and he is entirely correct. Thanks. I hate it. St. Miles says, I'm so confused these days whether to hold the door for women or to stand when they come into the dinner table or room. A lot of those are kind of considered outdated anymore. I guess just be polite and treat each other like human beings. I think that's probably the best rule of thumb. Yes, Paul, we truly appreciate your super chat. Thank you so much. That was very generous. Guess the patriarchy is back and alive and well, says Sarenko. Entirely correct. Men are 100% winning the battle of the sexes right now. But again, and I wrote about this on my Substack, I don't think the battle of the sexes is necessary at all. I don't think that the anti-feminist movement should be saying that we should hate women, and I don't think that the feminist movement should be saying that we should hate men. I don't think that either gender needs to hate the other gender, period. I think it's a very bad rule of thumb. I really hate it. I wish that we would stop fighting. It's much more important for us to team up, calm down, figure out ways to raise children together or build families together or just get married and be peaceful together. All right, this one. Now, this is a sacrifice that's being made in the name of the culture war that's going on right now, and I'm so proud of these girls, but this is very hard. Vermont Christian School is banned from all state sporting events after their girls' basketball team refused to play against a team with a trans player. The Mid-Vermont Christian School varsity girls basketball team dropped out of the state championships playoffs because of trans players on the opposing team. Mid-Vermont's head of school wrote that the team dropped out because playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardized the fairness of the game. The school was banned by the Vermont Principals Association, which oversees sports in the states, for violating its anti-discrimination policies on Monday. I'm going to stop you right there and say it's much more important to protect the safety of the teen girls in your care than it is to assuage someone's feelings about their own gender and obviously going to lose to them on the court. Very curious what happens to this. I really hope that they sue. If I recall correctly, there was another state up near Vermont where there was a girl who was suing over high school competition with a trans player. She ended up losing her case, but hopefully, this team will be able to sue and win. But let's see what they have to say. Policies state that students may compete on teams consistent with their gender identity. There's your problem. And protect against discrimination based on a student's actual or perceived sex and gender. The association added its policies reflected Vermont state law. There's your problem. Time to move to a different state. The Mid-Vermont Christian School's girls basketball team withdrew from a game against Long Trail Mountain Lions in the state playoffs in February after discovering there was a transgender player on the team. The school justified its decision, saying playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardized the fairness of the game and the safety of the players. Yeah, it does. Really does. Wow, look at this. This is Vermont. Holy cow, snowy and gray. The Mid-Vermont Christian School was banned from participating in all Vermont sports. That's so unfair. Vermont Principals Association, yep. On March 13th, 2023, VPA Executive Council met and determined that Mid-Vermont Christian's forfeit and corresponding rationale as shared in the Valley News of 2/5/2023 violates VPA policies which are aligned with Vermont state law. Specifically, the school's actions do not meet the expectations of the VPA's first and second policy, commitment to racial, gender fair, and disability awareness, and policy of gender identity, respectively. Thus, Mid-Vermont Christian School is ineligible to participate in VPA activities going forward. The prorated dues will be returned to you via check. Signed, the VPA Executive Council and VPA Executive Staff. State law in Vermont prohibits discrimination against student athletes on the basis of their gender identity. Again, it's much more important to keep in mind the practical application of the safety of your students, honestly. That's way, way, way more important than people's feelings. At the end of the day, nothing is more important than protecting your female player, who's probably like 13 to 16 years old, from having her skull cracked by a transgender player. I can't imagine being a coach and being in a position where you have the option of getting in trouble with state law or allowing your students to be physically assaulted by another player. Hopefully they do sue, but we'll see what they have to say. Andy says, don't forget to use publicsquare.com, publicsq.com. Thank you, dear. JJR says, yeah, moving is a good idea. I'm on the clock and DE arg. Oh, moving it is a good idea. Okay, for the times, yeah. OCB says, I use it here in the Bay Area, Andy. Good. Yes, they have great stuff over in the Bay Area with publicsq.com. Keenan says, thank you for smoking. The great state of Vermont will not apologize for its cheese. This is very cheesy indeed. I agree. Stuart says, of course, there are times when that is necessary when it comes to emergencies, but in everyday care, people should have the right. I do agree with you, though. You can't always choose who cares for you. At the end of the day, sometimes we got patients at the hospital who didn't want female care. And everyone's like, 99% of us are females. So we're either going to have to get a nurse from a different floor, or we're going to have to transfer you to a floor where they have male nurses. Sometimes we just can't accommodate that because it's not in our staffing. Like, we simply don't have a male caregiver. Andy says, Boston has some incredible restaurants on the app. That's correct. JJR, yes, Sue, trans is not a federally protected class. Correct, but I'd be curious if they have a case. They should definitely at least put together like a GoFundMe and kind of figure out what they could make happen. All right, Andy was asking people if we should move our time to 7 to 8 p.m. and I will continue to ask this question going forward. I would not mind having it be at 7 p.m. I do have one commitment over the next couple weeks that is at 8 p.m., but we will see what happens with that. If it's better for us to do it at 7, we can do that, or I can pre-record for sure. Anyway, I just wanted to read that story about the Vermont girls because this is so crazy to me. It's so wildly unfair. Unfortunately, I was thinking it's just going to have to be one of those sacrifices that we make to get our point across. Everybody's always up in arms. They're like, why aren't women doing something about this? If girls don't stand up for themselves, if women don't stand up for themselves, they voted for this. First of all, high school girls didn't vote for ish. Let's be real. They didn't vote for any of this. And whether or not they live in a blue state should not affect their ability to play basketball. That's so silly to connect politics to your ability to play the sport that you're playing in high school. That's so silly to me. And kids shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. Kids should not have to worry about politics just so they can play a game. Honestly, it's absolutely wild to me. Oh, here's another woke thing, and I'm going to show you guys this ad. GenScript mRNA IVT template solutions. Interesting. I kind of want to learn more about that, but now it's gone, unfortunately. And here we have an ad focused on Dot. She does not need CBD, I don't think, does she? What do you think, Andy? Nobody really cares what you think either. Moment Portland mayor, who is not a right-winger, slaps down far-left activist after she went on off-topic rant about being tear-gassed by police during a riot in 2020. Ted Wheeler on March 1st was chairing a city council meeting dedicated to the Police Accountability Committee. Left-wing activist Keely Higgins was invited to speak, but when given the microphone, began addressing the city's ban on tents, which house homeless. A typical leftist trope. Wheeler rebuked Higgins, calling her extremely disrespectful. She began chants of F Ted Wheeler. Okay, see, this is what happens when you allow leftist activists to join your town council meeting. It just doesn't work well for you. And I personally could not be happier to see the leftists fighting the leftists in Portland. Honestly, let them fight, because I think Portland deserves exactly what they get. Ted Wheeler, a 60-year-old Democrat who took over the famously liberal city in 2017, was chairing council meeting on March 1st when Keely Higgins took the floor, and the two engaged in a terse verbal back and forth. Higgins started her ill-timed rant by saying, Ted, I believe the last time I saw you in this kind of setting was when I gave testimony demanding you end the use of poisonous gas on humans in the city. So she was referring to tear gas, which is not actually poisonous. It's simply a deterrent for rioters, which she was, and she's apparently openly admitting, but of course Portland won't do anything about it. In February 2021, she testified in support of a bill to ban tear gas, describing how she was left choking for breath after being gassed at a protest. Maybe she shouldn't have been a violent rioter. Just saying. Portland became an epicenter of unrest, well, that's a very polite way of saying it, following the May 2020 murder of George Floyd by police in Minneapolis, with more than 100 nights of protests. That's right. Higgins said she was aware that the session was not open for an open forum, but she wanted to talk about the tent ban, a policy introduced by Renee Gonzalez, the Portland Commissioner of Public Safety, to try to end the tent camps for homeless people that have mushroomed around the cities. Businesses are leaving Portland because of the homeless population, because of the drug problems they have there. And this leftist activist wants to get out there and scream about tear gas bans and the homeless tent bans, and they're really just trying to talk about police accountability, which personally I fully respect. I don't care if you're a left-wing or a right-wing city. That's always something that you should be talking about or willing to talk about. Goodness gracious. I'm going to go for it, she said. To give some context as to why I'm here to address Renee Gonzalez's ban on the Wheeler then interrupted her, turning off her microphone, and said that it was off topic and inappropriate. This is extremely disrespectful to the Police Accountability Commission that have the floor right now to discuss their item, he told her. You're not talking about that, so either get on topic or leave. I doubt this activist has ever been spoken to like this before. Pretty sure that's why she's a leftist activist. Her parents never told her no, and no one over the course of the rest of her life up to this point has ever said anything like that to her before. She asked when she could address the tent issues, but Wheeler told her that he could not answer her question and said her topic was not on the agenda. That's fully fair. You see these people standing up? Higgins asked. We are all here for it. I don't think that's true. Wheeler replied, well, you're here at the wrong time. I'm sorry, this is the Police Accountability Commission. Higgins tried again to get Wheeler to allow her to speak. Can you tell me when the right time is? She asked. Wheeler replied, I cannot, but I can tell you it's not right now. Good for him. He then explained to her how she could sign up to give public testimony on any subject during a council meeting. She blurted out, lift the ban, it's killing people, it's inhumane, it's evil, it's state harm. Can I get an F Ted Wheeler in the trap? One woman could then be heard yelling out, F Ted Wheeler. The mayor, unperturbed, told her, you know, when you do that, it actually totally undercuts the rest of your argument? Wow. Higgins replied, I don't really effing care what you think, Ted. Wheeler said, well, as a result of your behavior, nobody really cares what you think either. My, this is a very spicy exchange, and I appreciate that he told her the truth. The point is, you are disrespecting other people who have put a lot of time and energy into the Police Accountability Commission, and you are being extremely disrespectful of their time and energy. I don't know why you think your opinion is more important than theirs at this particular juncture. Because, Ted, she is a leftist activist. Her opinion is more important than anything else that ever happens. That's why she's at a police accountability committee talking about all of this other unrelated stuff. She is the only important person in the room. She will only ever be the most important person ever. Because this form of leftism, which you have allowed to run rampant in your city, Ted, you're responsible for this, is nothing but sheer narcissism fueled by Marxist ideology. There's really no other way to say it. And I think that Ted fully deserves this, but I am glad that he kind of slapped back at her because truly, truly disrespectful. And just this whole city is going to hell in a handbasket. Like, they recently lost their Walmarts. Like, how bad do you have to be to lose your Walmarts? Like, I come from Colorado Springs. I don't know if you guys know this about me. I was greeting one of our chat members, and he said, greetings from Colorado Springs. That is where I'm originally from. I remember how crappy the neighborhoods were around some of our Walmarts. And I just remember thinking, wow, how could you possibly be so bad that even Walmart leaves? That's crazy. You have to be insanely bad to get that far. But, you know, Portland just lost like thousands of jobs, and they lost lots of cheap groceries for people. And it means that people are going to have to drive further for their stuff. Like, this kind of thing doesn't affect the rich. So when you kick these people out of your city, you have to recognize that you're not harming the rich, you're harming the poor. All right, so let's do our last three real quick here, like we did last night. Ohio is suing Norfolk Southern over the East Palestine train derailment. The February 3rd derailment saw toxic material leak from the rail cars and forced an evacuation of the town. We talked about this at the time and in the following days. The state of Ohio this week announced a lawsuit against Norfolk Southern in connection to the February derailment one of its trains near the town of East Palestine. Attorney General Dave Yost, filed the suit on Tuesday, contending that the railroad violated state and federal laws, among them the Ohio Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA, CNN reported. The February 3rd derailment, yes, we know, toxic, not good. The Biden administration drew scrutiny, yeah, that's putting it lightly, for its seemingly sluggish response, with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg becoming a major target of such criticism. Former President Donald Trump visited the town several weeks later and encouraged President Biden to do likewise, although he has not followed suit. Definitely a lose-lose for Biden at this point. Yost asserted the entire episode was preventable, telling reporters on Tuesday that he was concerned that Norfolk Southern may be putting profits for their own company above the health and safety of citizens and communities they operate in. For sure. Ohio Senators Sherrod Brown, Democrat, and J.D. Vance, Republican, have led a bipartisan group of lawmakers in pushing a rail safety reform bill that would tighten regulations on crew crew numbers and rail car wheel bearings in response to the derailment, though the measure has yet to gain traction with Senate Republicans. It certainly should if Senate Republicans know what's good for their demographic. Trump vows to break up the Department of Education and redistribute its functions to the states. Great idea, 100% on board. Why didn't he do this when he was in office? Serious question. I have yet to hear answers about this stuff because he's making promises now about stuff that he could have easily done or started the ball rolling on when he was in office. And yes, he had a lot of people who were against him at the time. He wasn't even thinking about any of this stuff. He was thinking about how to get the media on his side. That's why he went on a lot of these shows where he was constantly taken out of context and berated because he wanted the media to like him. He never succeeded and he never will. And I really hope that he's realizing this at this point. Again, I do think it's a good idea though, and hopefully this is something that whoever wins the Republican nomination can bring forward. Trump's Monday evening speech in the key primary battleground follows an appearance by Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis in the state. Following DeSantis now, Former President Donald Trump spoke in Davenport, Iowa on Monday to deliver his platform on education issues, and his 2024 presidential campaign kicks into high gear. During the speech, he stated his administration had extensively studied the possibility of breaking up the Department of Education altogether and reallocating its functions to the states, earning raucous applause. We studied it closely, and I was getting ready to do it, to pull the trigger. Why didn't you? The long-term goal, but it's now a short-term goal, breaking up the federal Department of the Education and redistributing its function to the states. Great idea. Let's make it happen. I can't wait to see some of these things come into action because he had a chance to do this stuff. He had 4 years in office. And he's just coming up with these brilliant ideas after the fact. Nonsense. And finally, this one. I just want to mention this one before we go. Can't really get too far into it, but it looks like there's not a lot here yet. Treasury finally hands over Biden family bank records to Republicans. Files reveal Hunter's associate got $3 million from Chinese energy company 2 months, from a Chinese energy company 2 months, and then paid out thousands to family members. Is anyone surprised? Is anyone surprised by this? I am certainly not. Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer revealed he received suspicious activity reports from the Biden family's accounts. DOI. Included a $3 million payment to a Biden associate from a Chinese company. DOI. Comer said Treasury only turned over the materials after threats of transcribed interviews with department officials. A Chinese energy company sent $3 million. This we know. Oversight Committee James Comer said in a statement provided to Daily Mail that his panel will use newly obtained bank documents to follow the money trail and determine if President Joe Biden was compromised. The new GOP leadership on the oversight panel has been seeking for 2 months bank documents and suspicious activity reports related to the president and his family from the Treasury Department, and Secretary Janet Yellen has finally turned over the requested material. Good. Comes after Democratic ranking member Jamie Raskin revealed in a blistering letter on Sunday that Republicans on a panel subpoenaed a Hunter Biden associate seeking years' worth of financial information. Good. Very, very good. The massive wire payment made just months after Biden completed his vice presidency term was to John Robb Walker's company. Walker is alleged to have formed a joint venture with CEFC China executives, which Raskin said is now a bankrupt Chinese energy conglomerate. After 2 months, I wonder why. Was it maybe because they gave $3 million to the Bidens? Just a thought. After 2 months of dragging their feet, the Treasury Department is finally providing us with access to the suspicious activity reports of the Biden family and their associates' business transactions, Comer wrote in his statement on the newly obtained information. I just have to say, it feels very much like the Bidens thought that no one would ever hold them accountable for this. I'm very grateful that Republicans seem to be thinking about doing so, and I really hope that they push through with this. I respect James Comer pretty immensely, and I'm optimistic with what they're planning to do here. But we will hold our judgment and see what happens with that for sure. Thank you guys all so much for joining me tonight. I am about to lose my voice and I have got to go make dinner for Andy. Great chats. Always a good time enjoying the chat with you guys. Andy says abolish the bunch of mumbled jumbled nonsense. I appreciate that. Matthew says, I've not heard doy in a long time. Yeah, for sure. All right. Thanks, Joe. Yep, we will see you next time for sure. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. For now, we will be at 6 p.m. We will consider moving it to 7 p.m. I know lots of people are still at work, but it seemed to be right about the sweet spot between, although because we are on the East Coast, it makes it very early for some people. For example, it's only just now 5 p.m. over in like Colorado and then, 4 p.m. in California. But thank you all anyway for making it. If you couldn't make it to this show, try to go and download it. Subscribe to the podcast on Google Podcasts, that's for sure where I know that you can find it. That's my podcast app that I often use. And you can find it on a bunch of other platforms as well. Trad Queen Story Hour over there. All right, you guys, I will see you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat place. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. I will see you all then. Bye, guys. How's it going?